That's why I'm out here, man, because I'm a father of two. They killed Stephon Clark, they killed Alton, they continue to kill us, and it could be any of us. You know, now having a little bit of color to your skin means you're guilty, and that shouldn't be the case.
Retired NBA player Matt Barnes leading the protest today in Sacramento against the police shooting of 22-year-old Stephon Clark. Clark's family releasing the results of a privately funded autopsy showing he was shot 8 times, 7 of the bullets striking him from behind or side. The findings fueling anger and raising questions over why police muted the audio on their body cams immediately after that shooting. And then in the shooting death of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the case concludes with officers facing disciplinary action but no criminal charges. For more on this, joining us now, Johsnon, MSNBC contributor and politics editor at The Root, and in studio, Paul Butler, MSNBC analyst and former federal prosecutor, author as well of Chokehold: Policing Black Men. Paul, when you see the results coming out of Louisiana, no criminal charges, and then we also get more information, more video, actually, of the body cam video from the 2 officers. What happened?
As a prosecutor, I would have used that video in my closing statement for murder charges against those police officers who we see wrestling Mr. Sterling to the ground, calling him every word in the book but the N-word, and then threatening him with a taser and then shooting him at point-blank range many times in the head. Viewers can believe their own eyes, so if they think they're seeing murder, that's what they're seeing. The standard for whether there could be charges is whether the police acted reasonably. The prosecutor in this case, a gutless blunder pandering to what he perceives as his conservative base, said that the officers acted lawfully. They got fired, Richard, by the chief of police, who said that they acted unreasonably.
You know, and when you listen to the statement, Jason, that Paul's alluding to here, you go through the words, and they're long, and there are many of them before the prosecutor says no criminal charges. And everybody watching it looks at the tape, as Paul is saying, and they may come away from this saying, how could this happen again? Just change the names, change the faces, and we've talked about this story way too many times.
Well, yeah, you know, Paul's exactly right. And at its core, we have to look at changing some of the fundamentals in the law, changing some of the fundamentals about whether or not simply being in fear is a justification for the use of legal force. This also requires political action for people to get more involved in replacing and holding county and city prosecutors accountable. This is a disgusting story that is not a new story. It's Tamir Rice, it's Alton Sterling. I mean, we hear about one of these kinds of cases every 6 weeks, and those are the cases that we hear about. And the thing that is most problematic about all of this, Richard, is the statements sound the same. The statements sound the same. It's not just the statements from the police officers themselves who always claim that, you know, Stephon Clark was running towards them. How many people ever run towards somebody with a gun? But the statements from the prosecutors are always the same. They essentially throw up their hands and say, hey, I tried my best, even though we knew they didn't. So it's disgusting. It's an embarrassment. It's a shame. And the lack of real change that we've seen as far as enforcement from this federal government and the inability of local communities to get the kind of justice they need is an American tragedy.
And we look to our leaders locally, don't we, when we're in these situations? I want to play a little bit of the police chief from Baton Rouge, Murphy Paul. Let's take a listen.
Treat our police officers with the respect that their positions deserve. And I assure you that the men and women of the Baton Rouge Police Department will reciprocate that gesture. Please stop resisting. Stop running. When a police officer gives you direction, listen.
Paul, you listen to the words here and your reflection based on the video that we've just seen.
The police should stop lying. They should stop blaming the victim when they shoot people who they don't have reason to do. Really interested in what's going to happen in Sacramento, where the police turned off the sound of their body cams precisely so they could gin up their story. so the fix was in. And so again, will that police chief, will he also blame the victim, or will he bring those officers to justice?
You know, I can't help but think of Ferguson on this, Jason. Right. And you remember the former police chief there standing up, and he really stood up for that leadership that I was alluding to here, right? That was able to I think, address what was local and difficult on both sides. And we can't help but think that there will be more of folks like Thomas Jackson, right?
Well, it's not really about the individual leadership of any particular police chief. I think that police chief in Baton Rouge is disgusting and a coward. There is absolutely nothing in his statement that should inspire or comfort any of the citizens in that community. For him to claim that essentially, if you run, if you are afraid, that police can shoot you. Oftentimes, remember, we've seen video where police officers are claiming people are resisting when they are not. It's not resisting if I'm trying to put my head down and get on the ground. So this is not about leadership, Richard. I think at this core, this is about accountability. This is about when are the officers who engage in this behavior going to be held accountable in the same way that a public school teacher, a doctor, or any politician would be held accountable if they made mistakes that cost people lives.
And you know, Paul, you're in the legal community. You see this. John Burris, who I was talking with last hour, he said, Richard, this may be 2 cases we're talking about today.
Yes.
He himself has just handled about a handful in just the last couple of months himself, similar to these cases.
There's civil cases where we see cities settling these cases. At the same time, police kill 1,000 people a year. There have been fewer than 50 prosecutions. Less than half of those cases have resulted in convictions over 15 years. And so the police are literally getting away with murder. At some point, that has to stop.
I'm going to try to put 1 + 1 together here quickly. Jason, when you see March for Our Lives, does that change the conversation at all?
I don't think it changes the conversation. I think it expands the conversation. I think that police violence against unarmed people of color is a slightly different question than general gun violence in this country.
All right. Jason Johnston, Paul Butler, great to have the two of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
All right.